Hey guys, welcome back to the shop. So next up is a baby cradle for this first grandchild, which we're very excited about. I'm not doing plans for this. There's just so much legal mumbo jumbo and everything around baby furniture. I'm just not going to produce any plans for this. I did purchase a set of available plans, but more for some of the measurements and things like that around to make sure that I was legit in what I was building and showing here. But most of this is a design on the fly, and there was a couple elements in the plans that I liked, and I will borrow those elements, but I'm not going to reproduce plans that are normally up for sale. So that's what's up. As usual, I've started with some milling here. These will be the two end panels. And I don't have the stock here for the legs and whatnot yet, but I'll pick that up probably tomorrow. This all started off as 12-quarter walnut that I picked up in Tennessee last year when I was there. And it was always earmarked for this project, and the time has finally come. So I did resaw them, and so all these panels are kind of book matched and put together in an order that we like. So I'm going to get these glued up, and then once we get it out of clamps and everything else, we can kind of lay out the end panels how we want, and we'll get going on a cradle. All right, so the end panels are glued up. They're not final milled yet, but they are book matched and grain matched, so everything looks really good to my eye, or what I think will look good. And I also created a template for kind of the shape of that end panel, and they fit on here quite nice. As well, I've roughed up a little bit of material, and these are all just rough milled for the leg stock. And I want the leg stock to be as thick as I can, and I wanted the feet to be around 20 inches wide, which I think is fine for this. And I know it's hard to see, but these are grain matched as best I could, but they're not glued together yet. So this is kind of what that template looks like, and I'm going to go ahead and cut these in a block so that I have more square surface, and then I'll rough out the rest of the feet later after the glue up. But that allows me, setting this on here and seeing what I want, it allows me to do some rough milling to get the bulk of this stuff off of here. It just makes the pieces way easier to manage. But this also gives me the opportunity to take a look at kind of how this, I'm trying to make this come out on camera, kind of how this comes together. And then it will be a dowel up here in the top so that this whole thing can swing, if you will. So that's all I'm going to do now is kind of rough out this stock and laminate another piece and do some finish milling. And then tomorrow, I think when we get after it, we'll start doing some finger joints on some stretchers, and it'll start coming together more so than it is now. So after lots of cleanup and sanding and prep, we kind of got most of the parts here now. Everything's only sanded to about 120, so there's still a lot of sanding, a lot of roundovers, things like that to do. But next up, we're going to work on finger joints in the sides of these panels, the end panels, as well as the stretchers, if you will. And we're going to do finger joints because that kind of matches the changing table that I previously did. The process is going to be exactly the same, and I've made a template and set all the saws up so that I can go cut this notch on all of these parts, and then we'll build the corresponding piece to help us with setups, and all of those pieces will actually go in the panels, so those stretchers physically attached to these panels. So that's what we're going to do next. I'm going to head over to the big bandsaw and make my initial cuts. Okay, so to get the last of the fingers, I'm set up with my table saw sled, and I've marked out all those notches, and you see I already have my kerf cuts here. So all I did is I just used a quick clamp to hold it in place when it was all lined up, made that one cut, shut the saw down, and reset for the other one. And now I can just go through and hog out the material. And I'm just going to use the single blade for this. I could set up a dado stack, but I'm just going to hog this out with a single blade. All right, guys, so there it is. These are in. They're not perfect. I got a couple little gaps I'll have to repair, and I'll just be able to wedge those with a little piece of wood and then fill. I also cut this at 8.5 degrees, which was the angle on my sides. That number didn't come really from anywhere other than that's what looked good to my eye. But it fit here nicely. So next up, we're going to go over to the hollow chisel mortiser, and we're going to cut for the square plugs. We'll be using 1/4-inch plugs on this one. I'll get them pilot drilled, as well as I work each one. I will go ahead and start sanding and pillowing the fingers, just because all that work has got to be done. As well, I'll come in here and pillow up the fingers on the panels as well. Probably tomorrow we'll come out here and lay out for the slats, and I think I'm going to install all of those with dominoes, but I still have all that stock to mill as well. So meet you over at the hollow chisel mortiser. All right, so now with a good dry fit, there's lots of numbers and things that I can get from this that are important, and I'll put those all on my whiteboard. My spacing between the slats and the size for the floor are the biggest things, but I also dropped into SketchUp, and based on my length, and I'll put the picture that I made in SketchUp up here for you. I made a storyboard for the domino locations in these rails, and I'm just going to use small dominoes and glue to hold these slats in. The slats are going to be a 1/2 inch, and my rails they're pretty close to about 7/8. And off camera I milled up all the stock for the slats, and I made several extras so that I could practice domino locations and things of that, setting up the router table to round them over when we get there. But I'm set up over here at the other bench with the domino, and so we'll move over there and I'll show you what's going on. So now over here at this bench, again, this is all my slat stock, and I just created a little jig to help hold all this in the table, so I can just slide these in, cut my domino, flip it around, cut my domino, and boom, move on to the next one. And that's all I'm going to do now. Okay, so there it is with the rails all installed. Apologies for not putting that on camera. I had to have a little bit of help just because there were so many pieces, and that person didn't want to be on camera, and that's okay. So again, I think it's pretty obvious how it all fits together. When I come out in the morning, we'll get after this bottom, but to prep for that tonight, I will go ahead and laminate the piece of 1/4 inch walnut on top of the 3/4 inch Baltic birch so that that's all ready to go in the morning. I may also cut this 8.5 degree angle. I'm not sure yet. We'll just see how late this takes me into the night. So off camera, I milled up a piece of 3/4 inch Baltic birch and laminated on top of it a piece of 1/4 inch walnut. I then cut my 8.5 degree bevel angle on the whole thing once it was cured up. And I still have my bevel gauge set from the very first angle cut we did. And I leave these sit till I am all done cutting that angle, and I know I'm all done cutting that angle. The sides, when this drops in, the angle on the sides will support this whole thing really without any problem, and I'm not real concerned about it, but I'm going to go ahead and add a couple of cleats to the bottom as well. But those cleats I have to actually dado into this bottom so it'll sit flush with the bottom. So I'm going to take this over to the table saw and hog out. This is a 1/2 inch by 1/2 inch square and cut again at the 8.5 degree angle. And I'm going to just go dado that material out. And when I know these fit good, I'll go ahead and glue these into the bottom and let those cure up. At that point, the cradle is pretty much ready for the finishing details. Lots of sanding. Where I routed these edges have to still be cleaned up all the way to the panel because I stopped short on the router table on purpose. But all that stuff has to be cleaned up, finished, sanded. Still have to do plugs, but I'm not going to do plugs until after I'm done finish sanding, and then be very careful with my epoxy when I put those in. But next up, we're going over to the table saw to start hogging out this material. So as you can see, I already have that side in. I thought it just might be easier to film on this side. These are only going to be glued in. This joint is plenty strong enough, and with the angle, this bottom can't fall through. It's physically impossible. More clamps on it, and we'll just let that cure up. All right, so next up on the list is getting this floor set in. I've set a couple of cauls up in here just to help me stabilize this bottom as it goes in. It's a fairly snug fit, but I don't want to drop it in there either. So the only glue is going to be on those small little runners that I added, and the rest of it will just be held in by the angles. There we go. I also have this lifted up just a little bit, just in case this bottom doesn't sit as it should, but it feels like it's pretty spot on. So I'm just going to put a little weight in this and let this cure up. So with the bottom all glued in, I'm going to go ahead and spend the rest of the day getting this pretty much finish sanded all the way up to 180. I think I'm using Rubio Monocoat on this one. And I'm not going to drill the leg holes just yet. We'll wait till the legs are more complete to locate those exactly perfectly. But that's going to wrap it up for this one. When we get after the next one, we're going to finish the base. We'll do the stretcher, complete the legs, even though most of those are already done. Get all the finish sanding done, and hopefully get this thing to finish. So until next time, guys, take care.